Hey there, and welcome to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Every week, we chat through different business building topics that will help you gain clarity around your goals, find inspiration in your journey, and also help you create a life and a business that you love. My name is Krista, and I'm a wedding and brand photographer and your go-to no-fluff business coach. In these episodes, we talk through both the tactical strategies, habits, and the mindset work that will help you take those really big leaps. And we always focus on the real talk and the behind the scenes of what it takes to create a sustainable and a thriving business. Because let's be honest, the work isn't always glamorous, but it's always worth it. So girlfriend, let's make some moves and start calling our own shots. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of the She Calls Her Shots podcast. All right, y'all, we're going to get really real today, because we're going to talk about a topic that is so incredibly important and that I really don't feel like is talked about often enough. And it's interesting because whenever I do guest interviews on other people's podcasts, this is something that is asked about a lot for me to talk about because we just don't hear about it enough. And it's so important for us to recognize that we're not going through and experiencing this on our own. And of course, the thing that I am hinting to is burnout. But we're going to also talk a little bit today about boundaries and how we're implementing our boundaries. If we have boundaries in place, how that is also going to affect when and how we experience burnout. So you all know I love to say on this podcast, right? We are going through this together. Whenever I first started my podcast, I was so nervous. I was like, thinking, I don't want people to think I'm this guru expert. I know it all. I have everything put together, right? As much as I would love to be able to say that to you, that's just not the case because I'm a human and I'm growing and going through seasons of growth. And every level that we reach as an entrepreneur, we're always going to be hitting certain ceilings, right? We always are going to have to be working through and breaking through things. And so in this episode today, right, like we're just going to get really real and really honest about how this is something that I have been experiencing lately. And the reason I know it's not talked about enough is because I was even nervous about talking about this because it's so vulnerable, right? Like it's so vulnerable to show up on a podcast and to talk about how you've been experiencing a bit of like lack of boundaries and burnout in your business. And if it wasn't such a stigma, if it wasn't, if it was more readily talked about, I don't think that I would feel that way. But again, like let's get in the weeds together, right? Let's work through this. Let's talk about this because I can promise you, if you're listening in, if you've had your business for more than, a couple months, a year, 2 years, however long, I can almost guarantee that you have likely experienced this lack of boundaries and then how it leads to feeling burnout. It's something that we are all going to experience time and time again in our business because we're humans and we sometimes say yes to more things than we should. We sometimes work too late. We sometimes cram our schedules. We sometimes get caught up in this mindset where we're, afraid, like in this lack mindset where we're afraid we're not going to make money or we're not going to get clients. So we say yes to too many things, right? Like we're human and we're going to have these seasons. And the thing I want to talk about first is this idea of boundaries. And for anyone who is into the Enneagram, as an Enneagram 9, I'm a peacemaker. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. And if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, I highly recommend Googling it, looking into it. I think it is one of the most useful and the best personality tool that I found that most accurately describes my motivations, my needs, kind of how I make decisions, right? It really helps me understand just who I am deep down as a person. But I won't get into that. That's for another podcast episode. But as an Enneagram 9, it is really hard for me to keep boundaries, to say no. We are people pleasers. That's who we are at our core. And so if you're a fellow Enneagram 9, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's so easy for us to just mold into other people. It's so easy for us to just say yes. It's so easy for us to just change our opinion to go along with what others are saying or thinking. And so I've kind of always had trouble really putting down boundaries and sticking with it. And That's shown up, I've had instances in my business throughout the last 12 plus years where I've noticed, I need to get better at setting boundaries, right? And over time, certain things got a little bit easier. The more I practiced putting boundaries down, the easier things got. But I'm also noticing that, again, as we reach new levels in our business, right? We already talked about how we're going to experience new challenges and new things we have to overcome. And that's going to mean that there's going to be new boundaries that we have to put in place that maybe we haven't practiced as much, or we're going to have to put, maybe we already had certain boundaries, but we really have to double down on making sure that we stay true to those boundaries. Because as we're growing, right, we're always in this growth mindset. We always want more clients. We always want, more income. We want more, whatever it is, right? Like more success. And so as we are continuing to crave that growth, we have to remember to put our boundaries in place. And so this was something that I've been experiencing lately because I just noticed that this is the interesting thing. Sometimes a lack of boundaries can come from a place of fear, right? Like, I'm worried that I'm not going to get more clients, or I'm worried that I'm not going to make enough money, so I'm going to say yes to all of these things because I'm in a fearful place of I'm not sure that I will get it otherwise, right? But what I actually experienced was the opposite. I wasn't approaching a lack of boundaries from fear. I was approaching a lack of boundaries out of abundance, right? And I talked about this a little bit in a couple episodes ago, I think, but where I had a period of time where I took on like 10 sessions in like whatever it was, like 8 days or whatever. I'm blanking on what it was. It was a lot. It was a lot of branding shoots. It was a lot of planning. It was a lot of prep. Everything was happening all at the same time. And it's interesting because I didn't do it out of fear. I didn't plan all of these because I was nervous that something wouldn't come in the future. I planned all of it because I was just so excited. Like I just was so excited that things were coming and I wanted to take action and move forward with them. But what I failed to realize was that because I hadn't really set myself up for success, there was a 2 to 3 week period where it just felt like a lot, if I'm being honest with you. It felt like a lot, and it was really mentally overwhelming, and I felt really stressed. And I think the part that made me frustrated was that I felt stressed, but I felt stressed from what started as an abundant place, right? Like I made these decisions because I felt so abundant and excited. And the end result was because that I just didn't think about my boundaries and what I would need, I ended up feeling really frustrated and overwhelmed. And so it was just really interesting because this particular season of burnout, I feel like really snuck up on me. I feel like burnout in general sneaks up on us. We don't really know that it's happening until it's here, right? It's those couple extra nights that we're working late. It's those few extra sessions. It's like these little things that start to add up until all of a sudden we just feel it, right? Oh my gosh, all of a sudden I feel like I'm really burned out. And for me, it was interesting because it didn't come from a place of negativity. It didn't come from like me coming from a lack headspace. It came from the opposite of that. And so I just want to get really clear on, right? Like this has been something that I've had to reflect on and figure out, interesting, this is a new way that I'm experiencing burnout. This is a new way that I've experienced this lack of boundaries and how I need to be more careful about how I'm setting myself up for success, because not all work, right, all happening at the same time is going to be good or feel really good to me. And so the reason I bring this up specifically is because I want to help you think about, how do you best work? And I think this is so important because as a coach, my job is to help my clients really get clear on how they can set themselves up for success. And some clients really thrive when they have really kind of rigid schedules, right? They have marketing calendars, they have everything planned out, they can batch plan things ahead of time. Like some clients really, really thrive with that type of structure. Other clients that I have, and myself included, I've noticed that when I try and create too much structure in my schedule, that's usually what leads me to feeling burnout, because that's just not intuitively the way that I best work and the way that I best create. But this has been really difficult for me because I feel like in the entrepreneurial space, what we're taught is like sit down, work hard, focus, discipline, get to work, right? Like it's this idea that we really just have to grind. And the interesting thing for me is the times in my business when I have seen the most success is when I am not subscribing to that belief at all. And it's hard because even though it's working in the moment, even though the things that I'm doing are working really well and I'm not subscribing to that grind hustle mindset, I'm actually giving myself a ton of space and self-love and time away from my business. Like, I'm actually implementing things that seem like they would be the opposite of work. And even in those moments when I see it working and I see it benefiting me, I have that ingrained in my mindset, this belief that work has to feel hard. And that's so mind-blowing to me because I felt like I have done so much work to try to reprogram that belief. But clearly, again, as we grow, we kind of have to relearn these ideas and these beliefs, and we have to really stretch ourselves to figure out how to put these boundaries in place and how to really stick to what works for us. And so that's one thing that I've really been reflecting on lately is, oh, interesting. I actually work much better. I'm more creative. I can create better content. I can serve my clients better. I can just operate in my business better when I allow myself a little bit more space for intuitive working, right? Like, I'm not setting the strict schedules. I'm not creating the marketing social media post calendar. That drains me, and I feel a lack of creativity when I do that. But it's hard because then I have to flip the switch and trust myself that, you know what, if I give myself space, the creativity will come. But that's been a belief that I've really had to start kind of doubling down on, because clearly there's still more work to be done there for me to trust myself and to believe that this is actually the way that I thrive. And so I say that in that I hope that I can encourage you. If you can relate to this, if you're like, Krista, that's me. I feel like I am going against the grain. I feel like my work doesn't look the same as everybody else. My schedule doesn't look the same. I don't operate in the same way. If that's you, I want you to know that this is okay. And your work schedule, your way that you get things done and that you operate may not look like someone else's. And sometimes you might feel crazy because you might think how is this going to help me thrive when it's so opposite and backwards from what I hear people saying? I want you to get really comfortable trusting in yourself, because that is what building a sustainable business is all about. It's about trusting ourselves, trusting the things that we need, trusting the ways that we operate, instead of feeling like we have to subscribe to someone else's way of building their business. And so all that to say that kind of all of this has been going on, it really snuck up on me. All of a sudden, I realized I was like, I'm feeling off. That's how if I could describe it, that's how I felt for a handful of weeks. I felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't exactly know what it was. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but something is off. And it wasn't until actually when I'm recording this episode this morning, all of a sudden it just clicked. I don't know. I don't even remember what I was doing. I think I was journaling and I was just reflecting, and it just clicked. I was like, oh, you know what? I think I'm feeling a little burnout. I think that's what's happening, because I realized I gave myself some space in a few days where I just completely disconnected from my business. And I mean completely disconnected, slept in, cleaned, played video games, literally just immersed myself in the things that I love to do. Read my psychological thriller audiobooks, all of the things that I wanted to do. And I think that's what made me realize this morning, oh, you know what? That's that disconnect that I felt like I've been needing. I tend to do that when I'm feeling burnout. And so it kind of just clicked for me. And I say this also because I want you to realize that not all burnout comes from a long overload of work. I think sometimes as photographers, we assume that burnout comes from, seasons in our business where we're just go, 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 go month after month, right? How many times have you heard people talk about in the fall? It's all of a sudden oh, it's the fall. I just need to get through these next 6 months, right? And we assume that that's how burnout happens, is from these big, long overloads of work. But I'm here to share with you that it doesn't even have to be a long period of time. The burnout really comes from that lack of boundaries and from your mindset, the things that you're telling yourself, how you're treating yourself and how you're making yourself feel. For example, I only had maybe a hectic 2 to 3 weeks. It really wasn't that long. But the thing is that not only did I feel a little chaotic, but I also tried to start implementing those really strict routines, right? Those really strict schedules. Like all of a sudden I had this huge marketing plan and daily schedule, and I didn't even implement it because once I wrote everything out, I already felt overwhelmed. I didn't even implement one day of it, I don't think. And so I'm here to kind of share that it doesn't have to come from these big, long seasons. Burnout can happen really quickly. And so it really just is going to depend on, what you've been telling yourself and the boundaries that you've had in place. And so I wanted to share this today because first and foremost, the thing with burnout, I want you to know you're not alone. We all go through this, and it's also inevitable. If you've experienced it in the past, it doesn't mean you're over it and you're never going to go through it again. I wish that that's how it worked, but that's just unfortunately not how it goes. Because like I said, we're all humans, and we're all going to sometimes say yes to too many things, or, have our mindset be in a little bit more negative place than we want it to be, or we're going to just, try to implement schedules and routines because we've all of a sudden unconsciously subscribed to this belief that we have to be in hustle mode and work mode, right? Like these things happen, these slip-ups happen. And so really accepting that, you know what, this is normal. I'm going to experience this. There's nothing wrong with me. And it also doesn't mean that the things that I'm doing, I'm like done with. I think sometimes we feel burnout. We think, oh no, should I not be doing this anymore? Do I not enjoy this anymore? That can be the case sometimes, but really sometimes we just need to give ourselves space to learn how to love the thing that we used to do. Right? So for me, what that has looked like lately is, I still love, as a photographer, as a brand photographer specifically, I love working with my clients. And I was actually reflecting on this the other day. The thing that lights me up the most in my photography business are shoot days and getting to collaborate with other women creatives and business owners and getting to plan this incredible, amazing brand session in beautiful locations with all of these fun and just really creative shot lists and session prep. Like I love all of that. And the day of the shoot, I am on fire. Like I am amped up. I'm so ready to go. And that's how I knew this burnout is it's more about me than it is about my clients. It's way more to do with me and my lack of boundaries and my headspace that I found myself in for a couple of weeks. And it has nothing to do with my clients, how much I care about them, how much I love doing photography. And so just getting really comfortable knowing that it doesn't have to mean anything about your business. And that's why I felt comfortable talking about this today, because again, we don't talk about burnout a lot. And I think if you're anything like me, if you're an Enneagram 9 or if you're a 2, like we are really, we care a lot about what other people think about us. And I know a lot of people care a lot about what people think about them, but 9s and 2s, like we are very susceptible to other people's opinions and beliefs. And so I found that I was afraid to talk about it because in my head, I thought, what if people take this to think that I no longer love what it is that I do, right? What if people think I don't love photography? What if they think I don't love creating content? And that's just not true, because I've done the inner work, I've done the reflecting, and I realized this has nothing to do with my ability to create content. It has nothing to do with my clients, how much I love working with them, how grateful I am to get to support such amazing people on a day-to-day basis. And it has everything to do with the inner work that I need to do in order to set myself up for success. And that's it. And that's the deep growth, that's the inner work that we have to do in order to build a business that's going to thrive. We cannot have a successful business if we are not growing ourselves and learning more about how we operate as people, and really making sure that we are putting ourselves in situations and creating systems that will help us thrive. And that was just a really big aha moment for me. And that's why I was like, you know what? No, I am going to talk about this today. I'm fired up now. I definitely want to talk about this because I want you to know that these feelings, this burnout, this lack of boundaries doesn't mean anything about you or the work that you do. And it has everything to do with your growth as a person and as an entrepreneur. And that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I love as a coach getting to work with other creative, other women business owners and help them through this kind of growth work. Because truthfully, at the end of the day, marketing strategies are great. Email lists are cool. Instagram posts are awesome. Instagram views are great. But at the end of the day, you will not have a thriving, successful business if you cannot, as a person, feel that you are constantly growing, learning more about yourself, how you operate, what feels good for you, what you want your life to look like. Like, those are the things that are actually going to be the things that propel you forward. And that's so beautiful because we then can learn how to take ownership and responsibility that our life is really up to what we make it. Like, our perspective, what we're telling ourselves, how we're showing up every day, the beliefs that we hold, right? How important is that? So much more important than your content strategy or your marketing, or like, those things matter, but you matter. Your business would not exist if it weren't for you. And you are doing amazing things, and you deserve to feel incredible and amazing and successful and loved and accomplished as a business owner. I want all of that for you and so, so much more. So I hope that that was encouraging. I just really wanted to come on today and share my heart. Truthfully, I only had a couple bullet points because I knew this is the type of sharing where this is the real, right? The real. This is the raw. This is the things that we're going through that I don't really need to create an entire outline for, because it's just, this is the business entrepreneurial journey. This is what we go through. And so I'm so grateful that I get to come on here today and to share this with you. I would love to connect with you. If this resonates with you, if you're raising your hand and you're like, oh, Krista, I needed to hear this today, please connect with me on Instagram at Hey Krista Marie. Send me a message, send me a DM, just say hello. Let me cheer you on. Let me just be here for you. Let me support you in this moment. And just recognize that the things that you're doing, this work that you're doing, is so important. And it's going to make such a big difference for you in the long run. So all of that said, I hope that this encourages you to think about your boundaries, think about the things that you might want to put in place, things that might feel a little off, or, if you've been saying yes to too many things, or if you feel like you might need to adjust your work hours, if you feel like you've been trying to subscribe to a certain type of way of working. I hope that this episode can encourage you to look into your gut. If you're the type of person who likes to trust their gut, trust your gut. If you intuitively know in your head what it is that you want to do and in your heart, trust that. And trust that the things that you need to do will come to you, and that everything will keep moving forward if you just follow your heart. Thank you so much for being here. I just am so grateful for you, and I will talk to you over in the next episode. One last thing before you go. I'd absolutely love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you've already left a review, I'd love for you to share this episode with your business bestie. I love getting to shout out my listeners on the show, and the more listeners that we have, the more that I can help others create a thriving and sustainable business too. Thank you so much again for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to hear your takeaways from today's episode.